Welcome. Can you believe it? Episode 10 of CFB Only. Thank you for being with me for the 10th episode of this show. Been doing it for ever since the Tuesday after Super Bowl. I've had to miss 2 Tuesdays like last week. I had some things going on with the Georgia Tech baseball game last Tuesday. But to make it to the 10th episode, how about that? I appreciate you being here. It's Tuesday. It's 7 p.m. It feels good to be talking some college football. Big announcement that just happened. The college basketball, March Madness, just said they're going to 76 teams. Don't know how much we're going to talk about that on this show, but that is wild. They're taking maybe a page out of the college football playbook and saying, hey, how can we make something good and make it worse? Expand the playoff. So that's just something to think about. Tonight we're going to talk about Brendan Sorsby. He is the big news going on in college football out of Texas Tech. Announced that he has a gambling problem, basically, and the story gets pretty wild once you look into it. Checked himself into a facility. We'll talk about that. I've got post-spring football top 10. You know, everybody has their way too early. Then you got to do post-spring. Most of the spring games are over by now. I'm not going to say I've watched every spring game every second, but I've watched a good little bit, read some reports, watched some other people that talk college football. I've got some takes. I'm going to give a top 10. And then I'm going to finish out the night with South Carolina schedule preview. I've been struggling whether to call them previews or reviews. I guess it's a preview because it's before, but we're going to talk about South Carolina's football schedule tonight as well. So thank you for being here once again for episode 10. How about that? Before we get started, just want to ask, as always, follow Deep Shot Sports on Instagram and TikTok. We are climbing to 5,000 followers on Instagram. Very close. I would think within 150 followers away. So hopefully by the end of this week. Right now it is it is April 28th, 2026. If we can get there by, what would that be, May 3rd on Sunday, that would be huge. So make sure you give us a follow. TikTok, we're climbing as well. YouTube, got a little climb in subscribers. I think I've gotten 15 subscribers in the last week or so. So thank you for that. Keep subscribing to the YouTube. That really helps. Obviously, that's what this show is on, and we have a lot of content that we post from this show that goes on there, Deep Shot podcast, things like that. So would really appreciate a subscribe on the YouTube. If you're listening on podcasts or on Spotify, wherever you're listening, please hit subscribe as well. Make sure you get to hear every episode. All right, let's get into it. Take a quick sip of water, but we're going to talk about Brendan Sorsby. The Brendan Sorsby news. The Brendan Sorsby news is incredible. It reminds me if what may have happened to me if I was a college football player. All jokes aside, I've had plenty of gambling problems, not knowing when to put it down. But Brendan Sorsby, who, if you don't know who he is, well, you probably do if you're watching this show or listening to this show, but just a quick rundown. Brendan Sorsby, former quarterback at Cincinnati. He was there the last 2 years, threw for about 45 touchdowns, the 12 interceptions. I'm going to be honest, just the games I saw him play against really good competition. He didn't play well at the game. I remember the Utah game, the Nebraska game against early in the season. But he was a highly coveted transfer quarterback coming out in the portal. He commits to Texas Tech, who seems to get every big name nowadays. If they're not going to LSU or Texas already or Miami, Texas Tech is right there with them. And apparently this guy was paid upwards of $5 million to go to Texas Tech. So they were very high bidders for Brendan Sorsby in the portal. And so before he was at Cincinnati this past 2 years, he was at Indiana before that. So he was part of the Indiana, I believe, in 2022. So the story basically starts there in Bloomington, Indiana, that apparently while at Indiana in 2022, Brendan Sorsby was gambling on the Indiana Hoosiers to win football games. Now, he wasn't playing. I believe he was redshirting there. So he really had no impact on the game. Kind of Pete Rose type situation, Pete Rose-esque, however you say that. Because Pete Rose, the MLB player back in the days in the 80s and 90s or 70s or 60s, whenever it was, he was betting on himself when he was getting hits, or betting on the Reds to win when he was getting all those hits. Still has the most hits in Major League Baseball. So unlike Brendan Sorsby, though, and unlike Pete Rose, though, Brendan Sorsby's not playing in the games. He was just making bets on Indiana to win these games. There was also reports speaking of baseball, that he was apparently on. Now he made all of these bets on a gambling app, FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever it was. He made these on a publicly known account, so it's not like a bookie that I know a lot of people may use underground type stuff. It's usually not really public. This was public. This is on a public app that everyone could see, or at least maybe not everyone can see, but it's viable out to the real world. Like if you did this on an underground bookie on a random website, and the only way you were paying and everything else was, through a Venmo or through cash or whatever, like it may be a little easier to get away with. This one is in public, in the public eye, or at least in the whoever controls the odds, Vegas or whoever, the gambling commission, that type stuff. So apparently he was betting not only on Indiana football games when he was there at Indiana, but also was apparently betting like balls and strikes on MLB games and in college baseball games, like $1 bets, $2 bets. They said as low as 50-cent bets he was making, $3 bets on a ball and strike. So this guy definitely had a addiction. As somebody who has gambled a long time, since I'm 26 right now. I've done it probably since I was 18, 19 years old. That is insane. I have never in my life bet balls and strikes, and I bet on a lot of things, okay? I've bet on some things I don't even want to say out loud. But balls and strikes, I mean, that's constant, like every second, like I guess you got to be calling that before the inning starts. How do you do that? But he was making those on the FanDuel or whatever he was using. So just insanely addicted. Let's say that. He was insanely addicted, which is why he's in the rehab facility he's right now. And props to him for going and getting things fixed out, not wanting to make it worse, and going to fix it. So basically the NCAA, he's been doing that for a couple years now, right? Did one in Indiana. Now, it seems that he was still doing this last year at Cincinnati. The NCAA reached out to Texas Tech a few weeks ago to conduct an investigation. So apparently about 2 weeks ago, yesterday was April 27th, so probably April 10th, April 13th range, they reached out and said, hey, we're looking to investigate it. So I'm assuming at that point, they went and talked, Texas Tech went and talked to Sorsby, probably convinced him to get into the facility, or maybe he could set it himself. Either way, he checks into a rehab facility. And if you don't know, the NCAA pretty much says you can't do this. There's been a couple of examples from back in the day, like in the 80s and 90s. There's a player at Arizona State, I'm forgetting his name, that was involved in something where he was basically point shaving for the basketball team for, it was mafia type stuff. There's probably been one or two. There was an Iowa State situation in a football game, I believe, a couple years ago. But this one seems to be very prominent because of the era we're in and the fact that he was just paid $5 million to go be the quarterback at Texas Tech, and this Texas Tech is basically banking their season on this guy being their quarterback. And the one big thing is he's on his last year of eligibility, and the NCAA has a rule basically you can't do this, right? This is integrity of the game, just like you've seen in other leagues like the NBA shutting people down for a whole season, or the MLB. You've seen it around. You've seen these things going happening, and it's harsh consequences for doing this. And so it's going to probably be harsh consequences for Brendan Sorsby as well. And he's on his last year of eligibility. This is the last year he can play college football. And maybe him going into rehab will help save him. Maybe they'll only suspend him for half a season. I would assume the NCAA is basically going to tell this guy, yeah, kick rocks. This is not happening. We're not doing this. We've got to have some sort of control. Maybe he'll appeal. Who knows? But apparently he's been doing this for a while. And also what's insane is that apparently Cincinnati, before he started last season, was tipped off about this and didn't say anything. Cincinnati has declined comment on the whole situation. So he's, like it's already been reported back in Indiana, so you would assume he was doing this last year, maybe why he was playing for Cincinnati. We don't have every bet that was out, but the big ones are, betting on Indiana, betting on balls and strikes, and doing this on apps so he can easily be trackable. I think personally that if I was the NCAA, you basically just have to be like, look, nope, you're done. Like this, whether you're, and I heard it on Pat McAfee today, and he said it kind of well. Look, I understand that nowadays, especially in today's culture, like gambling and talking about gambling is so much more prevalent than it used to be, right? You see it on all the bottom lines. Georgia playing Alabama, Georgia minus 7.5 or whatever. It's everyone's got the ESPN bets got their own little show they talk about it, and everybody's got their own shows they talk about it. It's put into everything, right? You got Kevin Durant doing parlays for NFL teams and LeBron, and like I get it, but if you as an athlete, as a player, all right, it's different when me sitting here on YouTube talks about it, who's never played a down or played a play of anything professionally or collegiately in any sport. When you're the player on the field, you've got to learn how to separate that. Maybe the MLB stuff of him betting on balls and strikes really isn't that big of a deal because he's not in the sport. He's not even involved. But like the stuff that he's betting on Indiana while he's on the team, I feel like that's just been known for a long time. You're not allowed to do that, and you can't do that. I wouldn't be mad at him if all we had here was, well, he's betting on games and on MLB games as a college football player, then that's probably not an issue. But assuming that he was doing this last year at Cincinnati, they knew about it, didn't say anything about it. Probably maybe betting on himself at Cincinnati, maybe betting, who knows? Maybe he was betting on himself to do bad in those games that against Nebraska and Utah because he was awful in those games. Maybe he was betting on himself to do well and was too much pressure, and I don't know. But if you don't shut this down right now, then does this become like a transfer portal situation or a eligibility situation where they can just keep doing it and then just appeal it? No, you don't want to get in that situation. So I would assume he's going to be screwed. And he probably should be. Texas Tech wise, Will Hammond's supposed to be the quarterback. He's coming off an ACL tear. He's supposed to be the backup. He's coming off an ACL tear. Could be ready by the start of the season. I would assume that's probably where they're going to go. He played a little bit last year. Had a good breakout game against Utah, I believe. So Brendan Sorsby, look, and again, I said this to start it. I was never that big on this guy coming out anyway. When he was hitting the portal and it was all this big hoopla about this guy being like the number one quarterback, and I just never really agreed with any of that sentiment. So I'm sorry to hear that you have a gambling addiction. We've all been there. I know plenty of people. So good job for setting yourself in rehab. But in terms of the integrity of college football, which we've already lost so much good stuff about college football, I would assume he's going to get the hammer, and I think that's good. So props to you, Brandon Sorsby. Hope you get better. All right, next thing. Post spring ball top 10. Let me take a sip of water. All right, post spring ball top 10. Everybody's got one of these, right? And again, some people do top 25s. I'm not in the in that camp. I just can't. Top 25 teams. That's so much thought that I just don't think really. And I heard somebody say this about the mock drafts. If you're doing like mock drafts, like a round mock draft for fun, that's cool. But if you're doing like 7-round mock drafts and no one's paying you to do it, it's kind of a much, and that's how I feel about a top 25. Like a top 10 I can do, top 25, no one's paying me to do this, so I just feel like that would just be a total waste of time. But anyway, post-spring ball top 10. So like I said, most of these spring games are over with. We've seen what every team's going to be running out with. A lot of teams have had injuries and things like that. So for the season, or when the season ended, I put out a way too early top 10. So now I'm going to put out the post-spring ball top 10. And I'm sure everybody will agree. Definitely some changes. I look for a spoiler. I had Indiana in the top. I had the top spot in my way too early. That has significantly changed. So here we go. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the top 10 now. If you are listening on podcast, get ready because here it comes. Okay, number 10. I've got Southern California, USC. Wrote down, still tons of potential on this team. I know they lost. Look, the draft was just last week, right? They lost Mekhi Lemon. They lost Jacoby Lane. Lost some stuff. But look, the transfer portal class is undeniable, right? The recruiting class, number 1 in the country this year. On top of that, Jaden Mayava, the quarterback, coming back, playing his third year, starting college football, and all 5 offensive linemen back, not to mention his running backs, King Miller and Waymon Jordan, are good to go. And again, big splashes in the portal, big splashes in the number 1 recruiting class. And if you didn't know, Gary Patterson is a defensive coordinator out there, and now the former TCU head coach that took him to the Rose Bowl and did all that good stuff. So I still like USC. I think I had them at 9, and you way too early, 9 or 10 when we did the first one back in like February. So these guys have kind of right around the same. Number 9, I got Oklahoma. Now they were not in my top 10 in the way too early edition back in February. They've kind of creeped up. I've wrote down here Mateer comeback season. Look, Oklahoma 10-2 playoff team with Oklahoma having 0 offense in the last 6 games of the season. All right, they already didn't have a run game. All right, and then John Mateer got hurt. Right, we all remember that, and then he couldn't do anything. So for the last 6 games, they relied on defense. They had to beat teams like Alabama and LSU and Missouri, and we remember all of that. The offensive line is sticking around from last year. They've added a couple key pieces. Amarion Harris from Arkansas, the offensive tackle, he's moving over there. So I think that's going to be a huge help to them. And I think with John Mateer coming back, I'm hoping the running back, you would think with a team that was not able to run the ball the way they were not able to run the ball, that Ben Arbuckle, that's going to be a huge emphasis that they're going to put on. Xavier Robbins is going to get the ball a lot more, and he's going to run for more than 470 yards this year. Book it. I don't know what his over-under is. Book it. He's going to run. They're going to run the ball better this year. Loaded up on tight ends. They got Hayden Henson from Florida. He looked good. Rocky Beers from Colorado State is at Oklahoma now. I don't know if anybody knew that, but he looked good in the spring game as well. They also stole Parker Livingstone from Texas. He's now over at Oklahoma. He made a lot of big plays for Texas last year. So I really like what the offense has done to kind of help out John Mateer. I'm really believing in John Mateer having a comeback season. So I've got Oklahoma here at number 9. At number 8, I got LSU. Wrote down got the talent, and that's what you're banking on. Spring game, we didn't get to see a lot of Sam Levitt or any of Sam Levitt. He's coming off a foot injury. Whit Weeks pretty limited as well. But, you know, we still have all the transfer portal talent. We still have Lane Kiffin. We still have Blake Baker. We still have Charlie Weiss Jr. I think those are key additions, right? We saw a little bit of Jordan Seaton in the spring game. He looks like a monster. He's going to be great on that offensive line. Princewill, don't know how to say his last name, but the big guy from Ole Miss, his name's Princewill Ngbakbu or something. I don't know. Don't want to be rude. Reloaded the wide receiver room with J.C. Brown out of Kansas State, Eugene Wilson out of Florida. So we've seen the talent that they've got on the field. They've got to put it all together. We really won't know a lot until we see Sam Levitt and we see Jordan Seaton going. But I'm banking on all of that putting together. They had a whole offseason of happening, and I think when you just look at a talent roster like theirs, it's got to be top 10 worthy. And here's another thing. We're going to keep going on this list. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm just going to say you already see it. But if you're listening on podcast, Texas Tech was like number 7 for me earlier in February. They're out now because of this news. Like I'm sure they'll still be really good in the Big 12, but I can't say they're a top 10 team anymore. So my number 7 team now is Indiana. They were number 1 back in February for me. And this is just based off Kurt Cignetti. They had their spring game on Thursday night during the draft when Fernando Mendoza was getting picked. And he went on TV and just said, we're not a very good football team right now. So I'm going to believe him. Look, they got to completely turn things around, right? Fernando Mendoza turned into Josh Hoover. That's not all. A lot of they had their most draft picks ever the other day, right? So they've got a lot of things that are going to turn around. D'Angelo Pons, I thought he was a really good player. Got drafted, I think, in the 2nd round the other night, the corner. They got to replace him. A.J. Harris, the corner from Penn State, he's coming over to replace him. He was also at Georgia at one point. they kept both coordinators. They also got Turbo Richard, a running back out of Boston College, which is good because they lost both their running backs they had last year. So Nick Marsh, the wide receiver out of Michigan State, after losing some of the talent they had out there as well. So I think they will figure it out right now. You cannot just think, with the Cignetti and the coaching staff that they have, it's just all going to crumble within that. But I'm taking a step back. I was very high back in February, but Kurt Cignetti's telling me they're not good right now, so I'm just going to go off of what he says. Now, the good news is, if you haven't seen Indiana's football schedule, it's dog water until they play Ohio State in like week 8, so they'll be fine. All right, number 6, I got Miami. Darian Mensah is what they needed. He's an absolute stud. Go watch some of that spring game if you haven't already. And they're also bringing back Mark Fletcher and Malachi Toney. Almost like Kadarius Toney. They're bringing back those two guys, which were huge pieces to what they did last season. And so not only that, they revamped the wide receiver room. They brought over Darian Mensah's teammate from Duke, Bacarte. I forgot to write his first name down. I think it's Chris. I don't know. That's why I got to write the first names down. But defense brought in guys like Damon Wilson. Damon Wilson from Missouri used to be at Georgia. Jarquez Carter, talking too fast. Jarquez Carter out of Ohio State as well. So I think Miami should cruise through the ACC this year. They are going to be just as good as last year, and they were pretty good last year. As long as they don't slip up in games they shouldn't, they should have a better record than last year, at least in regular season-wise. Number 5, I've got Oregon. It's, you could argue they could be a little higher here, but there's going to be 2 new coordinators. Now, they're promoting from within, so these are not 2 guys that are not familiar with the culture and the system and the players that are on the field. They do have Dante Moore is coming back. We all know about that. They did lose Noah Winningham, the running back, to the NFL this past week. So the running backs that they don't have a lot of starts out of them, but they've got some experience in the room. The offensive line is stacked with experienced talent. Everything around there, if you go look at the depth chart, it's redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt senior everywhere. So, they will be good on the offensive line front. I know maybe it's not as they haven't played tons of games together in terms of the group that they're probably going to put out there, but it's super experienced talent that they're going to. And the defense is bringing back guys like Amari Washington. These are terrible names. DJ Ugalele's brother, Mayala Ugalele, Tioti, and Bear Alexander. And now the first 3 guys have said terrible names, terrible pronunciation. Sorry. All 3 Big Ten. All 3 were all Big Ten last year. And Bear Alexander is a stud as well. So I think really the only thing you got to know from Oregon is how are those new coordinators going to be in the Big Ten. Now they should have a heads up because they've been in the system for a while. But I just think when these other teams in front of them, I'll give them the edge a little bit. All right, number 4, I got Notre Dame, stacked roster, but they won't be tested for a long time. So we can think Notre Dame's the best. Notre Dame could be the best team in the country all year long, and we won't really know it until we get to the playoffs. But C.J. Carr is an absolute stud. They obviously lost Jeremiah Love and Darian Price in the first round, which is crazy. But Anais Williams, a running back, who's gonna be assuming the position, 9 yards of carry last year. So I think they will be fine. Bringing in guys like Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham from Ohio State to be wide receivers out there, that's no small feat. Just because they weren't playing that much of Ohio State does not mean that much. Defense brings back basically everyone. I think it was 9 of the top 10 tacklers. So they've looked really good so far in the spring if you haven't watched their spring game. And it's just kind of assumed that that Notre Dame is going to be very good. But again, we won't really know how good they are until we get to probably November. So we'll see. All right, so the last 3 here, they're pretty interchangeable if you ask me. Like, you could put these in any order. And for me, I'm going number 3, I got Ohio State. The offensive players are there. Julian Sam, Jeremiah Smith, Chris Henry is the freshman wide receiver they got this year, 5-star. I think he is going to be very, very good. He probably kind of reminds me of Jackson Smith, Nick Jigba type. They just get those everywhere. But Bo Jackson, the defense lost a lot of stud. Bo Jackson, the running back, Defense lost a lot of studs, but Matt Patricia will reload for them. I have no doubt about that. I think Arthur Smith is the question mark. In terms of the offense, and they're playing the spring game, it's easy because things are planned or they practice against. But I've said it before. Arthur Smith could cause some problems for Ohio State in terms of he's not really known for explosive wide receivers in his NFL days. So we'll see what happens with that. I think Brian Hartline this upcoming season may have an impact on them. I'm not going to say they're not going to be good, but they have a tough schedule and everything. So a little skeptical about what Ohio State is, which is why I have them at number 3. But they're still a really good team, and they could easily be number 1. I wouldn't be mad at you if you said they were. Number 2, I got Texas. I'm just riding the Texas hype train. You can tell me I'm bouncing on it, whatever. I believe Arch is going to be very good. He's got a little bit of a foot injury, so that kind of held me back from putting him number 1, to be honest. But Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo are ready to go for him. Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown out of the transfer portal at running back. Will Muschamp is probably the biggest addition out of anybody that they added. The defensive coordinator, he used to be the defensive coordinator at Texas, head coach of Florida and South Carolina, defensive coordinator at Georgia with national championships. Colin Simmons, the linebacker, is probably going to be a top 10 pick. Rasheem Biles from Pitt, they got him out of the transfer portal. They really like him after this spring game. Texas is just loaded, okay? There's nothing else I can tell you. I just think Texas is going to be good, and people can say that Texas is overhyped, which I don't understand the argument about how Texas is overhyped, because Texas has literally only been in the conversation for 3 or 4 years now, and two of the last 3 years they were in the Final Four, and then last year, you could argue if they just played anybody but Ohio State, and I get they lost to Florida, but you could still argue if they didn't play Ohio State, they were in the playoffs. So I don't really understand how they're overhyped every year, or they get all this love for nothing. They didn't show out the way everybody thought they were going to last year, but they were still they still kind of found their mojo and still were able to win games. So I got them at number 2. And number 1, I got Georgia. Look, that's probably going to be seen as a very biased thing. That's okay. Again, like I said before, we got the 3. You could do 3, 2, 1, and I would be fine with any of them. Okay, this is just a feel for me, and I give you my reasons why. In Ohio State, I'm questionable about Arthur Smith. Texas, Arch Manning's got a little bit of a foot injury right now. Okay, and plus Texas never beats Georgia, so that's another reason. But Georgia's number 1. Gunnar Stockton, I've heard a lot of noise about how Steve Smith said he sucks. David Pollock said he needs to get better. He's gonna get better. Okay. I'm under the notion, and I've been proven wrong on this before, but I like to usually believe that players get better season after season. Now, that doesn't always happen, but on a team like Georgia, like when Stetson Bennett won the national championship at Georgia, at the first one, and then the next season came out and was a Heisman finalist. I mean, I kind of felt like that was due. Like, it was like, yeah, the guy just won a national championship. He's just going to let his dick hang and do all he wants. I kind of feel like Gunnar Stockton, he ain't won a national championship, but, dude, he's done pretty well, okay? And everybody loves him. So I feel like he's going to get better. He's going to read the field better. I'm not worried about that. The running back room, Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, those guys are back. We've got some other guys you haven't watched the spring game. They were absolutely explosive. The offensive line, yeah, we lost Monroe Freeling in the draft, Michael Morris in the draft. Don't care. We've still got very good continuity on the offensive line. Got a new head coach running it up as well. Isaiah Kenyon, we got him from Georgia Tech, and London Humphreys, Talon Taylor. Those are the wide receiver room's the biggest question mark on the team, but those 3 are supposed to be the ones that are going to anchor it down. So Kobe White, he's supposed to be more like the Zachariah Branch type that we've got running out there this year. So I'm excited to see what that's like. Lawson Lucky, Elias Williams, the tight end. The tight end room is looking great. I mean, Jaden Redding, what is his name? Godly, I'm missing out on the tight end. Hold on. Jaden Redding, Georgia tight end. Jaden Riddell. Sorry, Jaden Riddell. He looked good in the spring game as well. So I really like what Georgia's throwing out there. And defensively, you've got Raylan Wilson, you've got Chris Cole, you've got KJ Bolden, you've got Ellis Robinson. It does suck that we lost to Mars Williams, the Auburn transfer. We'll be fine. We've got the best coach in college football. And I've said before, I had Georgia at number 2 in this way too early and back in February, and I think they've moved up a spot. So that is my top 10 for the post-spring football. Look at that. Post-spring, we're about to be in May. If you really think about it, folks, we're not far at all from football season. We're not far at all from football season at all. Okay. Before we finish up the show here, we got the South Carolina schedule preview. Water has been sipped. South Carolina put out a post a little bit earlier today talking about Shane Beamer, if he's on the hot seat. Last year didn't go very well, 4-8. Offense was pretty bad. They fired the OC, so they've made some changes. 2 years ago, they were very close to making the playoffs, but you're sitting there, and then go 4-8. Blow that game against A&M. Just not a good look, right? So we're gonna see what happens with South Carolina. We're gonna talk about their schedule here in just a second, and I'm about to pull it up, but I'm skeptical looking at this schedule. I know one thing. I'm about to show you it, and if you're listening on podcast, you'll hear me say it. They're guaranteed a good start. They have a pretty good start. All right, here we go. Week 1, we've got Kent State. That's right, 1-0 all time against Kent State. I believe the game was in 1995. So we're 1-0. South Carolina will be 1-0. Book it. And then week 2, we got Towson. 2-0. I don't know if they've ever played Towson. Couldn't find the stats on that. By the way, if you ever want to go find about stats or teams' history playing each other, Winspedia. Great little website right there. But 2-0. South Carolina will be 2-0. I promise you they will be 2-0 to start the season. And then week 3, we've got Mississippi State at home. First time they're playing them since 2023. Big battle for 13th place in the SEC. No, I'm kidding, dude. But maybe that could be the tiebreaker spot. So who knows? 10-7 all time against Mississippi State. South Carolina is. South Carolina's won 9 of the last 10 games in this series. So that's good. They got this game at home. Their first 3 games are at home. Who knows? Maybe they'll get a night game for this one, but this is probably not a game a lot of people are going to be locked in onto. I know my guy Jonathan Kessinger and Adam Green will be. Ryan Steed. I know a couple South Carolina friends that will be locked in on that. Probably not much of America will be locked in on South Carolina, Mississippi State, but it is, and look, what would you put the percent chances at that South Carolina will be 3-0? 75%? 80%? Let's see. And then week 4, they go to Alabama. 3rd year in a row they're playing Alabama. And in the last 2 years, they have been so close to beating Alabama. Remember 2 years ago when they were down? It seemed like they were down and out at the start of the game. Came back, had a chance, got the onside kick. That whole fiasco, got sacked, kind of fumbled it at the end of the game. And then last year, same thing. They were up a touchdown with 5 minutes to go. I think maybe more than that. And they blew it. Ended up losing by a touchdown. So they know how to compete with Alabama. They just got to put it all together on the field. So that would be huge. I mean, because at that point, if South Carolina beat Alabama, that would be the biggest win Shane Beamer's ever got, and it would put some expectations. It would probably save his job, if we're being honest. Let's say if he's 4-0, if Shane Beamer is 4-0. He has saved his job. He can be the South Carolina head coach probably for a very long time. All right. Then week 5, Kentucky. 4 wins in a row South Carolina has against Kentucky. And I know my South Carolina friends know this. Kentucky used to own South Carolina back in the 2010s. Not anymore. They've beat them 4 times in a row. So good for them. Got them at home. Who knows? That might be an SEC Network night game right there. But, hey. 4-1 at worst, I'm thinking right now for South Carolina. So that's good. And then week 6, they go to Florida. First time playing Florida since 2023. South Carolina has no wins at Florida since Steve Spurrier was head coach. They haven't won in Gainesville in a long time. But this is a different Florida team. We really don't know what we're going to get out of them. Who knows what we'll be expecting out of Florida by week 6. So this is going to be an interesting one. South Carolina at Florida in week 6. And in week 7, we've got the bye week. And in week 8, they have Tennessee at home. Last time they played Tennessee was 2023. Tennessee is 27 and owns the series 27-11. But South Carolina, 3 wins in a row for South Carolina or 3 wins in a row at home. They have beaten Tennessee 3 times in a row in Columbia. And the reason why is because Tennessee won there in 2020, but the win was vacated because Jeremy Pruitt was giving away McDonald's bags of money. So technically, South Carolina has beaten Tennessee 3 straight times in Columbia if you take away a vacated win. So they've got that going for them. But, we all remember last time they were in they played in Columbia, and South Carolina put up, I think, 60 on them. So, they've got that could be a night game. And the thing about South Carolina is their stadium at night is just intense. And so it seems like they always just get SEC Network night games. So that could happen here. That could very much happen here. And who knows? We still don't know what to expect out of Tennessee, really, when you think about it. So it'll be interesting. And then week 9, they go to Oklahoma. 3rd year in a row they're playing Oklahoma. 3rd matchup all time. So South Carolina won the first one 2 years ago. Oklahoma won it last year. Both teams have won on the road. So if you're thinking about it, South Carolina is kind of due for a win here, which would be huge. Let's just stop and think about it at this point, right? At this point, when they get to Oklahoma, they played 8 games. What is their record? 4-4 at worst? I think this is a 5-3 team at that point. Now I'm a little nice to South Carolina, so people say I'm a South Carolina hater. I'm not. I'm not a South Carolina hater at all. I actually have like I mentioned all my friends' names a minute ago. I'm a hopeful for South Carolina because I like when they're a little bit better and those guys have something to talk about. I think that's 5 wins. 5 wins through 8 games right there. And I think they should beat Florida. And if they somehow beat Alabama, then this team, if they beat Alabama at Alabama, then you could start talking playoffs for this team for sure. I'll stamp it. Okay, week 10 they got A&M. Now A&M is 10-2 all time in this series since they joined the SEC. No one ever will forget the Kenny Trill game back in the day in 2014. That Thursday night. So it has not treated them well since. But, again, South Carolina has won the last 2 games at home against A&M. So, huge. That's huge. And they get this game at home. So, just like Tennessee, they own A&M at home the last 2 times. That's something you got to be proud of. And look, all jokes aside, that's huge that they get the games like A&M and Tennessee at home because they got to go to the road to Alabama and Florida early in the season, and they're going to need that fan base behind them. All right, then they get week 11. They go to Arkansas, first time since 2022. Arkansas leads the series in this one 14-10. I don't really know much about this matchup other than that. It's hard to tell. I think that's a win for South Carolina, though. If they can steal any game on the road this year, it's going to be that one. That is the most likely they will steal a game on the road. Arkansas is like the biggest question mark in the SEC just because the new head coach is, and no one's really keeping up that much with what they're doing. So we'll see. And then week 12, they got Georgia. First time since the SEC East days back in 2023. Last time they beat Georgia was 2019. The Jake Fromm 3 interceptions to the exact same guy game. Brutal. Last time they beat Georgia in Columbia was 2014. Oh my God, that was a brutal year. That was brutal. But anyway, that was the last time they beat them in Columbia, so they got a chance to do that again 12 years later. This feels like it could be a night game. Could be a scary little situation. I would hate for Georgia to have like 2 losses and going into this game and just have pressure on them. Hopefully that doesn't happen. That just doesn't feel like a situation I want to be in. I if I'm a Georgia fan, I want that game to be a noon game bad, because that means South Carolina is not good, or there's really no stakes. So that would be big. And then week 13 they go to Clemson. I found this out earlier, which is, I wish I didn't have to say this, but I do. Clemson is 74-44 all time against South Carolina. I had no clue. That's pretty wild. 30 more wins than they do. This is a can't lose for both coaches, though. I mean, Dabo and Shane Beamer, two of the biggest clowns we know in college football, they have to win this game. There is no debate. You cannot be losing this game. This is probably the worst game you could lose on either of these teams' schedules. I mean, I know they got, FCSs and, Towson's and I know Clemson plays teams like Florida State, but that just can't happen. All right, that's South Carolina's football schedule. That will wrap it up for tonight's episode of CFB Only. Thank you again for tuning in with me, listening to me talk college football for a little bit. I will be back again next week. I don't see myself maybe taking another Tuesday off for the rest of the offseason. I feel like I'll be here every single time I can be. So make sure you're back here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. If you haven't already, follow Deep Shot Sports on Instagram and TikTok. Subscribe on